There is one scene that has haunted Tolkien fans for over 2 decades now. Elrond and Isildur standing at the edge of Mount Doom, the fires of Orodruin burning beneath them, and Elrond shouting, "Cast it into the fire, destroy it." And Isildur, holding the One Ring in his hand, simply says no. Then he walks away, and Elrond just watches. He does nothing. For 20 years, fans have been asking the same question. Why didn't Elrond just push him? Why didn't he grab the ring and throw it into the fire himself? Was he simply too weak, too afraid, or was there something else going on? Hello everyone, welcome to Middle-earth. Today we're going to dig deep into one of the most controversial moments in the entire legendarium. We'll examine what really happened at Mount Doom, what Elrond could or couldn't do, and why this moment is far more complex than the movies suggest. Because here's the thing. What you saw in Peter Jackson's film isn't exactly what Tolkien wrote, and understanding that difference changes everything. The first question, what actually happened at Mount Doom? So this brings us to the first question we need to ask. What actually happened according to Tolkien's writings? Because if we're going to judge Elrond's actions, we first need to know what those actions actually were. Here's the truth that surprises many fans. That iconic scene inside Mount Doom? It never happened. Not like that anyway. In Tolkien's writings, Elrond was never standing next to Isildur at the crack of doom. There was no dramatic confrontation at the edge of the fire. Peter Jackson created that scene for the film because it was visually powerful and emotionally effective. And it was. But it also created a problem that Tolkien never intended. It made Elrond look weak or foolish. What actually happened was this. After Sauron was defeated, and Gil-galad and Elendil lay dead, Isildur cut the ring from Sauron's hand. He claimed it immediately as Wergild, a blood payment for the deaths of his father and his brother Anarion. Later, at the camp of the Last Alliance, both Elrond and Círdan the Shipwright advised Isildur to destroy the ring. They counseled him strongly. They told him it should be cast into the fire, but Isildur refused, and he had every legal and political right to do so. This changes the entire situation, doesn't it? We're not talking about a split-second decision at the edge of a volcano. We're talking about a deliberate choice made by a king in his own camp, surrounded by his own soldiers. The second question, could Elrond have physically stopped Isildur? So here we need to ask the second question. Even if we accept the movie version, even if Elrond was standing right there at Mount Doom, could he have physically stopped Isildur? Let's think about this carefully. Isildur wasn't just some random soldier. He was a Númenórean of the highest lineage, a descendant of Elros, who was Elrond's own twin brother. The Númenóreans were not ordinary men. They were taller, stronger, longer-lived, and more resistant to corruption than any other race of men in Middle-earth. Isildur himself had just survived a brutal war against Sauron. He had fought through siege and battle for 7 years. This was a warrior in his prime. And Elrond? Yes. Elrond was powerful. He was one of the mightiest elves remaining in Middle-earth by the end of the Second Age. But Elrond's power wasn't primarily physical. He was a lore master, a healer, a leader. He had Vilya, one of the 3 elven rings, but its power was preservation and protection, not combat. Could Elrond have defeated Isildur in single combat? Perhaps, but it would not have been easy, and it certainly wouldn't have been quick. But here's what makes this even more complicated. Isildur was already holding the ring, the One Ring, and the ring wanted to survive. We know from Tolkien's writings that the ring had a will of its own, that it could influence events and people around it. Would the ring have allowed itself to be destroyed so easily? Would it have whispered to Isildur, given him unnatural speed or strength? We can't know for certain, but we must consider that the ring was actively working against its own destruction from the moment Isildur picked it up. The third question. What about the political reality? This brings us to perhaps the most important question of all, the one that fans often overlook because it's not as dramatic as a fight scene. What were the political consequences of Elrond's possible actions? Let me paint the picture for you. The last alliance of elves and men had just won the greatest military victory in the history of Middle-earth. They had defeated Sauron himself, but at tremendous cost. Gil-galad, the High King of the Noldor, was dead. Elendil, the High King of the Dunedain, was dead. Anarion was dead. Thousands upon thousands of elves and men had fallen in the 7-year siege of Barad-dûr. And now, in the immediate aftermath of this victory, while the bodies were still warm, what would happen if Elrond killed Isildur? Think about it. Isildur was now the High King of both Gondor and Arnor. He was the supreme leader of all the Dúnedain in Middle-earth. His soldiers, thousands of them, were right there. They had just fought and bled alongside the elves, yes, but Isildur was their king. If Elrond killed Isildur, even to destroy the ring, it would have been seen as murder, as betrayal, as an elf killing a man to steal a trophy of war. The alliance would have shattered instantly. The trust between elves and men, built over years of fighting side by side, would have been destroyed in a single moment. And remember, the elves were diminishing. Their power was fading. They needed the friendship of men for the long ages ahead. There's also the matter of legitimacy. By what right could Elrond kill Isildur? Elrond was not a king. He was a herald, a lord, an advisor. But Gil-galad was dead, and Elrond had no authority to command the High King of the Dúnedain. Isildur had claimed the ring as weregild. This was a legal concept that both elves and men understood. The ring was payment for his father's blood. It was his by right of conquest and by right of grief. The fourth question: did Elrond understand what the ring really was? Now here's a question that few people consider. Did Elrond truly understand, at that moment, just how dangerous the ring really was? Yes, Elrond knew the ring was evil. Yes, he knew it should be destroyed. But did he understand that this was quite literally the only chance Middle-earth would have for nearly 3,000 years? Did he know that the ring would corrupt Isildur, lead to his death, and then lie hidden for centuries before returning to threaten the world again? I don't think he did. And how could he? Elrond was wise, but he wasn't omniscient. He had never seen the full power of the ring in action. Sauron had been defeated. The immediate threat was over. To Elrond's understanding at that moment, the ring was dangerous, yes, but Sauron was gone. Perhaps he thought there would be other opportunities. Perhaps he thought Isildur could be convinced later, when grief wasn't so fresh, when wisdom had returned. This is something we must remember. Hindsight is perfect, but foresight is blind. We know what happened over the next 3,000 years. Elrond did not. He made what seemed like a reasonable choice based on incomplete information, counsel and persuade, rather than kill and destroy. The fifth question: would it have been morally right? And finally, we must ask the deepest question of all. Even if Elrond could have stopped Isildur, even if the political consequences could somehow be managed, would it have been morally right to kill him? Tolkien was a deeply moral writer. His works are filled with questions of good and evil, of means and ends. And one principle runs throughout his legendarium: you cannot do evil, that good may come. Gandalf refuses to take the ring because the power to dominate others, even for good purposes, is itself corrupting. Frodo must carry the ring because his innocence and mercy are more important than raw strength. If Elrond had killed Isildur, an ally, a grieving son, a king who had just lost everything, to destroy the ring, what would that have made him? A murderer, certainly. A kinslayer in the technical sense, since they shared blood through Elros. And perhaps in some subtle way, a servant of the very evil he was trying to destroy. The ring was destroyed in the end, not through violence or domination, but through mercy. Bilbo spared Gollum. Frodo spared Gollum. And Gollum, in his final moment of obsession, destroyed the ring himself. This is the moral logic of Tolkien's world. Force and violence rarely solve the deepest problems. Patience, mercy, and trust in providence ultimately prevail. So why didn't Elrond stop Isildur? Let me bring all of this together. The reason why Elrond didn't stop Isildur, couldn't stop Isildur, is not simple weakness or foolishness. It's a complex web of factors. First, he probably wasn't even there in the way the movie shows. The confrontation at Mount Doom is a cinematic invention, not canon. Second, even if he was there, physically overcoming Isildur while he held the ring would have been extremely difficult and uncertain. Third, the political consequences of killing the High King of the Dúnedain would have been catastrophic for the alliance between elves and men. Fourth, Elrond didn't have full knowledge of what the future would hold. He was making decisions in the moment, without the benefit of 3,000 years of hindsight. And fifth, killing Isildur would have been morally wrong. a betrayal of the very principles that the last alliance was fighting for. Elrond did what he could do. He counseled, he advised, he urged Isildur to destroy the ring, and Isildur refused. That refusal was Isildur's choice, and the consequences fell upon him and his line. Within years, Isildur was dead, betrayed by the ring at the Gladden Fields. The ring passed out of knowledge, and Elrond waited for nearly 3,000 years for another chance. What comes next? But here's an interesting thought for another video. When that chance finally came, when Frodo stood at the Council of Elrond and said, "I will take the ring," did Elrond hesitate? Did he remember that moment with Isildur? Did he wonder if he should have done something different 3,000 years ago? And more importantly, did he consider not letting the ring leave Rivendell at all? We'll examine Elrond's decision at the council and what he learned from the Isildur tragedy in another video. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Do you think Elrond should have tried to stop Isildur by force, consequences be damned? Or do you believe he made the right choice, the only choice he could make? Comments are especially important to me. I read all of them. You can be sure of that. If you enjoyed this analysis, you can like and share with your friends who love Middle-earth. And for those who want to support even more, you can support through Patreon or Twitch subscription. See you in Middle-earth. Take care of yourselves.